Welcome to the Canadian Beef Cattle Podcast, presented by the Beef Cattle Research Council, the most popular content from beefresearch.ca, available on the go. Before we get into this week's episode, a quick message from the BCRC.
Bull selection is an important decision with many factors to consider, and price is one of these considerations. The BCRC Bull Valuation Calculator helps estimate break-even bull prices based on various cost and revenue parameters specific to your farm or ranch. For instance, by inputting data such as expected calf performance and the cow-to-bull ratio, you can determine the potential revenue the bull will generate, which will adjust its purchase value accordingly. Check out this helpful tool linked in the show notes. This episode is titled, How to Calculate Carrying Capacity. Carrying capacity, often referred to as grazing capacity, is the amount of forage available for grazing animals in a particular pasture or field. Accurately calculating this capacity is crucial for determining an appropriate stocking rate. This helps maintain productivity for both your animals and forage, while also ensuring the sustained health of the grassland resources. One method to determine carrying capacity is by reviewing past stocking rates and grazing management information, then assessing the condition of the pasture. But what if historical stocking rate data is unavailable, or you are uncertain about its accuracy and reliability? Carry capacity could also be calculated based on how much forage is in the field, but this can change over the grazing season or year to year. Carrying capacity can be calculated using various techniques. All of these methods involve some trial and error, as they must be monitored and adjusted over time. When calculating carrying capacity, you should consider three questions. How much forage is available? How much of that forage can be used by grazing animals? How many animals can graze on that piece of land, and for how long? The BCRC Carrying Capacity Calculator provides a roadmap for answering these questions using two separate methods. Method number 1, forage estimates based on provincial guides, and method number 2, field-based sampling, also known as the clip and weigh method. In this podcast, we will review the 4 steps involved in each of these two methods. Method 1, using provincial guides. This method relies on provincial forage production guides and is particularly user-friendly and effective when the pasture condition, or range health, is consistent throughout the field and the forage plant community is uniform. This method involved 4 steps. Step 1, determine pasture conditions. For tame pastures, pasture condition class definitions provide general descriptions for classifying tame pastures as excellent, good, fair, or poor. For excellent yields, 75 to 100% of the potential is achieved, with 95% desirable grass and legumes, less than 5% weeds, and an average to above average fertility program. Good yields achieve 60 to 75% of potential, with 90% desirable grass, less than 10% weeds, and an average fertility program. Fair yields reach 50 to 60% of potential, with 60% desirable grass, 20% or more weeds, and a below-average or non-existent fertility program. Poor yields result in 33 to 50% of potential, with less than 50% desirable grass, 50% or more weeds, and no fertility program. Step 2, estimate forage yield. Once the pasture condition classification has been determined, forage yield can be estimated based on that information and the precipitation zone for the location. For example, if pasture condition is good and precipitation of the zone is at 14 to 18 inches, the estimated forage yield is 740 pounds per acre. This is based on Alberta tame pasture data and may not be applicable to Rangeland or other provinces. Higher carrying capacities can be achieved with fertility programs or intensive grazing. Specific provincial guides should be used to assess forage yield and stocking rates for your specific soil zone or ecosite. Some of the various guides are linked in the show notes. Step 3, calculate available forage. Once forage yield has been estimated, we need to determine the appropriate utilization rate for grazing. The utilization rate determines how much forage material should be left behind to maintain future production. Overutilizing pasture can damage plant recovery, reducing forage productivity, and allowing less palatable plants to take over. Recommended utilization rates for native pastures vary from 25 to 50%. For tame pastures, recommended utilization rates range from 50 to 75%, depending on fertility and rainfall. For calculating forage requirements, animal unit months, AUMS, are used. An animal unit, AU, represents the grazing impact of different livestock types. 1 AU is defined as a 1,000-pound beef cow with or without a nursing calf, with a daily dry matter forage requirement of 26 pounds. An animal unit month refers to the amount of forage needed to meet the metabolic requirements of one animal unit for 30 days. 1 AUM is equivalent to 780 pounds of dry matter forage. To calculate the total forage available in a grazing area, pasture size is essential. For example, if a pasture is 160 acres, with an estimated forage yield of 740 pounds per acre and a 50% utilization rate, the total available forage for grazing is estimated at 59,200 pounds. From this, the calculator determines that the pasture can support approximately 76 AUMs, or 2,277 animal unit days of grazing. Step 4. Calculate the number of animals that can graze. Different classes or sizes of cattle consume different amounts of forage. For example, a yearling steer is equivalent to 0.85 AUs, while a 1,300-pound cow with calf at side is estimated at 1.3 AUs. In Step 4, we need to know the average weight of the grazing animals to determine and enter their equivalent AUs. If we would like to know how many cow-calf pairs could graze a specific field for 1 month, we would simply divide the number of annual unit months, calculated in Step 3 by the animal units for a cow-calf pair, estimated at 1.3. Following these 4 steps, one is able to calculate an estimated carrying capacity without stepping foot on the pasture. However, it should be mentioned that the data for this method is currently only available for Western Canada. When forage yield data becomes available for eastern regions, the BCRC Carrying Capacity Calculator Method 1 will be updated. As mentioned, there are many ways to calculate carrying capacity. The second method we will review is Method 2, field-based sampling. This is also known as the clip and weight method, and as the name suggests, requires more hands-on labor. Producers may choose field-based sampling if provincial guides are unavailable for their region, or if pasture types or conditions vary within their field. Like Method 1, there are 4 steps. Step 1, sampling. Samples are collected by clipping all forage close to the ground within an area of 50 by 50 centimeters, 0.25 square meter. The choice area should be representative of the pasture that has not been grazed. It's best to clip during the grazing season, building up data for a number of years to get a picture of the average forage yield that is representative across varying weather conditions. The number of samples taken will vary with the size of the field and how uniform or varied the forage production is within the field. The goal is to take enough samples to capture the variation in the pasture in order to be representative. Step 2, dry, sort, weigh, and record. Dry the forage samples using a food dehydrator or in an oven at 100 to 120 degrees Fahrenheit for at least 1 day, or dry at room temperature over several days. No matter what technique used for drying, make sure to keep the samples contained and identified. Once dry, weigh each sample and record the total dry forage in grams. Sorting the litter from the green material is optional. This step will give more information and be more accurate compared to using total dry forage weight, but is a time-consuming process. It is important to balance accuracy with time availability. If a producer doesn't have the time to do it or can't commit to it on a consistent basis, then it may not be worth the effort. Weights can be entered into the BCRC Carrying Capacity Calculator, Method 2 in grams. Recording the green material weight is optional only if you went through the sorting process and collected that data. Step 3. Calculate the available forage. The BCRC calculator converts average dry forage weight from grams per 0.25 square meter to pounds per acre for estimated forage supply. For example, the average dry forage weight of 52 grams per 0.25 square meter is converted to 1,851 pounds per acre. Enter your chosen utilization rate and the pasture size to calculate total forage available in the pasture, and then number of animal unit months. Step 4. Calculate the number of animals that can graze. Use the average weight of the grazing animals to determine and enter their equivalent animal units in Step 4 to calculate the number of cattle that can graze on that piece of land. As mentioned in Method 1, Step 4. If we would like to know how many cow-calf pairs could graze a specific field for 1 month, we would simply divide the number of annual unit months, calculated in Step 3, by the animal units for a cow-calf pair, estimated at 1.3. The two methods provided in the BCRC Carrying Capacity Calculator are not the only ways to calculate carrying capacity, and they can provide more robust insight when combined with more detailed management information, for example, historic stocking rates, precipitation, range health monitoring. However, they are a great place to start. Calculating carrying capacity is the starting point to understand how to balance forage supply and demand. Effective grazing management supports forage yield, animal health, and productivity, all of which will impact cost of production. It also benefits the pasture ecosystem. For more resources about grazing management and how to develop a grazing plan, please explore the links in the show notes.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. You can find all relevant links and information at beefresearch.ca or in the show notes. The Beef Cattle Research Council is funded by the Canadian Beef Cattle Checkoff and strives for excellence in the production of Canadian beef, cattle, and forage through research, innovation, and extension. Tune in every Tuesday as the Canadian Beef Cattle Podcast delivers straightforward insights, expert information, and a wealth of practical knowledge for Canadian beef producers. Subscribe now.